This week, Paul and I interview Johnny Xmas, Director of Field Engineering with the Australian firm Caseta. In the news, millions of passengers are affected by yet another airline hack. Exploit in WebEx leads to system-level privileges. And engineers test in production by turning it off and back on again. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Layered Insight is the industry's first embedded security approach for containers. Trusted by Global 1000 enterprises to secure their containerized applications, it's the only solution that requires no root privileges, has zero dependency on the underlying infrastructure, and is fully portable across any container environment. Unified DevOps and SecOps, enabling the rapid development of containerized applications without worrying about security. To learn more, please visit layeredinsight.com/ASW. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 37, our 38th episode of Application Security Weekly. I am, of course, your returning host, Keith Hoodlet, and I'm excited to be joined once again by my illustrious co-host, Paul Asadori. Paul, what's going on, dude?
I'm feeling illustrious now since you called me that. Thank you.
Every week.
Every
week, Paul. Every week. You're always illustrious to me, man.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Couple of quick announcements, by the way. So first, I wanted to give a special shout out and thank you to Julian Burton and Pamela O'Shea from the OWASP Melbourne chapter. AppSec Day Melbourne, or AppSec Day Australia, that I spoke at a couple of weeks ago was awesome. So thank you both and the entire volunteer team over there for an incredible conference experience. In addition, of course, check out our on-demand material. Some of our previously recorded podcasts webcasts, all of our podcasts are recorded as well, are now available on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. So go check that out. We got some really great content on there from Black Hills, Signal Sciences, Stealth Bits, Javelin Networks, domain tools, of course, Logarithm, Endgame, and more. So go enjoy some of that as well in your free time. With that, I want to turn things over, of course, to our interview today. We have Johnny Xmas, a predominant, as he likes to say, thought leader, which is funny and interesting. In the,
predominant.
In the US,
predominant.
I can't believe you said that.
Leader, predominant. So, of course, you know, he's a thought leader in the US and European information security community. Mostly known, of course, or jumped onto the scene big with the TSA master key leaks back in 2014, or between 2014 and 2018.
Gosh, that feels like so long ago now.
I know, right? It's like, gosh, it's almost 2019 at this point, Johnny. We got to up this up a little bit here. But other than that, you're now director of field engineering with, is it Caseta or Casada? Am I pronouncing
Casada?
Just like the cigar company.
Yes,
Quesada.
But
less
with a K.
Spanish.
It's a little more Russian
K?
with the K, not the Spanish K. You don't want people saying that around your company.
Got it. Well, it's casada.io for those listening. Of course, you're there to provide unprecedented defense against the automated abuse of web infrastructure. You've previously held a consultant or a lead consultant role at Uptake, there for industrial cybersecurity platform, and spent many years in the penetration testing world as well. Johnny Xmas, welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Now, wait, is it Johnny Xmas or Johnny Christmas? Because everyone says to me, you should have Johnny Christmas on the show.
I gave you guys one chance to not screw it up, and
we did or did not?
Actually, it's not possible to screw up.
Okay.
So
either way is acceptable.
Yeah, I don't care. That's what's funny is I really don't care. I say Christmas. A lot of other people say Xmas because I write it with the X, and that's how they see it. And I don't mind either way. What's funny is
wait, is that your legal? Did you change your name? I always thought of it as a handle. But
it's a legal alias and a registered trademark.
Okay,
so there.
That's awesome. No, it's awesome.
So don't just go throwing it around. Yeah. What's funny is other people will fight about it. And I'll have someone come up to me and go, "Hey, man, this guy thinks your name is Johnny Xmas, like he says the whole word." And I go, "That's what I say.
Too.
That's what I say it is." And they go, "Oh, they don't know it's Xmas though. It's I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this."
I feel like we needed some explanation for the name.
Oh, well, I'm glad we got that clarified.
Because it left me wondering for some time, and then I got to meet you, and you told me about it, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I say Christmas. When I introduce myself, I say I'm Johnny Xmas. So I guess that's official because I get to declare it, but I also don't care.
Jeff Mann, so those of you who know Jeff Mann listening to the show, was like, I've been hanging out with Johnny Xmas. You should totally have him on the show. I'm like, yeah, I've heard of him. We totally should. And since by affiliation, I was like, well, you were hanging out with Jeff Mann in a lot of different security events. I'm like, you must be a cigar smoker. Like, guilty by association.
In fact, every time you say Jeff Mann, you have to have a herf.
Jeff Mann, yes.
Enjoy the dead air as we...
That's right. No, that's
so
awesome.
the funny part about all this, by the way, Johnny, is I was actually going out to your Hackfest Canada talk last year to confirm if it was Johnny Xmas or Johnny Christmas, and I think it was Patrick and introduced you as Johnny Xmas, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna go with that." And so I've totally
screwed up. You got to get it from the horse's mouth. That's it.
Yeah.
Weren't you in the airport last year as well? And you stared at me for like 3 hours and then didn't say a word to me. Yeah, good work.
Well, you look like,
hey everyone, if you see me somewhere doing nothing, come say hi.
I got you beat though. When I was in the airport leaving DerbyCon, I heard someone calling my name, and I'm like, I'm just hearing things. Like, it's been a long conference.
Right.
It was Keith. I was like, oh, hey, what's
totally
up?
Snubbed Keith.
All right, now we've got your name squared away, awkward moments at airport squared away.
Yeah.
I think we're done at this point. Okay. I mean, successful podcast.
Oh, I don't want to knock my drink over. This is cool.
It's always involving me at this point. It's like I'm always that guy. I've ran into April right at the airport at Heathrow in I don't know, May of this year, just randomly as well. And it took me a little while. Based on your feedback, actually, Johnny, from last year, when you're like, you should just go up and say hi to people. I actually did. So
yeah, good. Go. Thank you. April's a great person to go say hi to as well. She's super fun. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
that's why I'm here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of Hackfest last year, where I was, creeping on you in Montreal airport because of delays for hours and hours before, I eventually said hi to you.
Yeah, we had like a 3-hour delay when we were on the same flight, and we were just sitting in this room for 3 hours, and he didn't say a word to me.
Well, at least you guys got into Canada, because that's...
Oh, yeah, that's its own
thing. Yep.
Canadian customs, surprisingly, the most, hands-down Gestapo customs I've come across globally. And I go to Asia a lot, and never anything like Canada.
Like, pretty much you have to say, I'm here to see your beautiful country. If you say anything other than that, you're detained.
Yeah.
If you're coming from the U.S.
And you have to say it like an American. You're like, I'm here to go and see the fort y'all got up in Quebec. Anything besides that, they get suspicious.
It's funny because the opposite side, because I had the same experience, Johnny, but the opposite side was going into Australia was like the fastest custom experience I've ever had. It was like, boom, I'm in.
Well, it's because you have to register in advance. You have to get that ETA, which is just it's auto approval, and you pay $20, and it's really just a way for them to get $20 out of you, and it's a fantastic scam.
I mean, if you're coming from the U.S. into Australia, they figured you've come that far, they're not going to deny you at that point.
No, you got to do it in advance.
Yeah. So you have to register in advance.
Right. So
you have to tell them you're coming.
It's literally a guy at the door going, "You got $20?
Yep.
Just give me $20. I'll let you in."
Sure. It's fair.
All right, here's $20.
It really does feel that way. The other thing as well is what's really funny about it is you can't have a criminal history of any kind to get into not Canada, excuse me, probably Canada too, but Australia. It's like, do you have a criminal background? Yes. You can't get into Australia, which is weird because it was a penal colony at one point.
Right. So, you don't know if that's like a factor of denial. Maybe they want that. All they do is just ask. They don't necessarily deny. They said, "Do you have a?" Maybe that gets you elevated privileges.
It gets you to a different part of Australia.
You get the VIP bar. Oh, you're one of us.
So
wait. So Hackfest CA, you're speaking there.
Yes.
Yes.
What is your talk about?
My talk this year is on my tooling around with the Venmo public feed. As most everyone knows, Venmo hit the media over the summer with the realization that the public feed in their application is available to the public
Wait, that's the payment app? Venmo?
So Venmo, the payment app. It's a massively used payment app, especially amongst the youngsters, the millennials.
I have a question about that. So why Venmo and not PayPal, which lets you exchange money with no fees if you say it's for personal use? Am I still correct on that?
Yeah,
okay.
That's still correct. So Venmo, their whole feed system is really what catapulted them to being a competitor in the mobile payment space.
Like a feed. What describe feed?
It's they have a social media aspect to their payment system. So if you open the app, you get you have your personal feed, you have your friends feed, and then you have a public feed. And every new account has the public feed, has posting to the public feed enabled by default. And so, as you know, most of the general public doesn't change any of the default settings for anything that they use ever.
Now, a feed, if it's a payment app, it's like I can post publicly that I paid you $20 in exchange
and
for
you
some
can put
cigars.
you put a little message in there. You put a little cigar emoji or an eggplant in a volcano or something. And
Gotcha.
And then that goes into the public feed. And then so someone in Florida can see that Paul Asadorian paid Johnny Xmas for eggplant volcanoes. $20.
He wants eggplant volcanoes too, and asks you for eggplant volcanoes.
And I can ask you for that, and then you can give me thumbs up emoji, and then transfer me $20, and everyone sees that. And that's terrifying because people are doing a lot more than just trivial things on there. There's a lot of utilities that accept payment via Venmo. There's a ton of retailers that accept payment via Venmo. I'm poking at my notes right here because I just happen to have it up. Who'd have thought? About 2 million retailers accept Venmo payments. And so people can see everywhere you're shopping. And that's one thing on its own as standalone statistics, but then you can piece together exactly what someone has done in a day or something that someone does regularly at regular times. You'd be able to find out where they're going to be at and when, take care of them that way. It can get tricky pretty fast. And it's general, all of the general OPSEC problems that come along with any other system where you're checking in or just kind of posting your location, except that people don't realize that you sort of are still posting your location, or at least you're posting your activity, you're posting who your friends are. One of the biggest problems with social media is that you can lock down your social media as tightly as you want, but all it takes is one friend who doesn't lock theirs down.
Yep, I see.
All of a sudden it's all become pointless.
And then I'm assuming do they charge you fees for transferring money, or does that depend on the use case?
No, they don't transfer your fees.
So you're the product, hence the public feed.
Right. They're making money off of the amount of money that they have in the bank, and they invest that. They're a bank, so just like PayPal does, just like anyone else, that's where they get their money. It's on that end. And like I said, to try and get a foothold in that mobile payment market, they use this social aspect to say, "Hey, look, it's fun."
Okay, I get it now.
And they've come out publicly like that's their stance on it.
Right.
Because asking if you owe me money, it's kind of awkward. You go, "Hey, Paul, what's up with that $20? It's been a week." But if I can do it with cute little cartoon emojis, you're going to give me an LOL and ship me $20, and then it's fun and funny, and we're friends.
I can't believe that's what it's come down to.
And that's what it is, and they're killing it.
I want my $5.
They're the
What movie is that? Where's the paper?
Oh,
I want my $5.
Oh, it's from the 80s. What is that?
What movie is that?
Better Off. No, is it Better Off Dead? Better Off Dead. Yeah. $2. $2 is the paper boy. It's sort of great
because that's awkward, right?
That's it, right? The whole movie is based around that paperboy trying to get his $2.
If they had Venmo, it'd be really easy, short skit.
Newspaper emoji, bicycle, number 2. Kid would have been paid.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole nother chunk of the movie going on, but
but it's irrelevant at this point. That's the only part we remember.
That stupid paperboy. Yeah, it's the 4th most used mobile payment method in the U.S. It's crazy, and it's just like slightly behind. Here, what do you think like the top 4 are? Venmo. So 3 other mobile payment methods.
So I've always used PayPal. For that because I'm old, and PayPal was our only option to send payments electronically.
Yeah.
If you didn't want to pay a fee, there's that whole like personal payment option where there was no fee associated.
Right.
So that's what we always
PayPal's not even in the top 4.
Really?
Yeah.
What about like Apple Pay? Is Apple Pay in there?
Apple Pay is number 3. It's only number 3.
Android Pay? Can you send? You can't send because you can't send. That's only for transactions in a retail sense.
I'm not familiar with it, but it would count because it is a mobile payment method.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've used Android Pay in the past, and then it magically stopped working.
Like the Google Pay, Google Wallet. Yeah, that's why it's not on the top. I think it's because interpersonal you can send it interpersonally that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a poorly marketed Google
Starbucks
service.
is in there, by the way.
What's
Starbucks is probably one of them for the mobile pay.
So Starbucks I kind of put under standalone apps, like apps where you can only pay one company with them. I group all those together, and so no, they're definitely in the top 10, but not in the top 4. So the other
really,
two,
even that grouping, because the grouping is kind of weird. Because like if I shop at 5 different places, I got 5 different apps that I got to manage to make. That's why I didn't like it.
Right.
I like just one app.
And so things like Starbucks, like definitely, I think Starbucks is 6 or 7, definitely up there. But the second most is just like straight up banking apps, you know, Chase or Zelle. You know, everyone's using Zelle now. The number one mobile payment method in the U.S. is Facebook Messenger.
What?
Yeah.
What?
That blew my mind.
How is that?
Scares me.
Because you can make
fiercely.
payments directly with...
Yeah, they added that functionality a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Well, because they make everyone install it as a separate app,
right?
And Facebook has over 1 billion users at this point.
Something like that.
I mean, they've lost some, but probably not enough to make a difference.
If we want to talk active users and things like that, it gets a little blurry.
Yeah.
But Venmo's number 4, which makes it, you know, a huge database of public information.
Wow.
And it's just out there.
I've got to ask, based on the ranking, is it based on dollars transacted, number of transactions? Like, how did you rank them?
Oh, for that one, I did it based on it was a review, like a survey, just asking people, hey, which of these do you use? And more people said they used Facebook Messenger than anything else. And it was, and it allowed for multiple choices. And then it was like, which of these do you use the most? Second most, third most.
And what types of attacks have we seen against these ecosystems to this date?
Well, so back in 2017, it used to be super easy to just dump the whole public feed. And so this is any kind of...
one vulnerability you're talking about is the public feed. And you dump it and you can glean analytics from that.
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, could, there's also anything that applies to, you know, a web app or a mobile app, you know, that's your...
Sure.
Your groupings of attack, you know, account takeovers, things like that. If you got a bad password, that's the bottom line.
Yep.
Right now, Venmo does require 2FA with at least an SMS number, so that's cool. So that's really, I'd imagine, cut down on the amount of account takeovers there.
Sure.
The FTC has required them to register as a bank and go through all of the regular audits that banks have to, which includes penetration testing, security auditing. So you can see this massive jump in security and privacy enhancement between 2017 and 2018 with Venmo, which makes actually scraping the public feed now way more difficult than it used to be, which is cool, except I found an issue in there that I won't disclose here on the show yet that made it way easier.
To dump the public feed.
Right.
Even though there was measures in place, to prevent against that.
Right.
But what you believe stem from them having to register as a bank with the U.S. and as a result, increase security.
I'm guessing. I'm not sure. Either way.
Speculation, sure.
It could have been just a decision internal, which would be great as well.
I'd imagine they'd always have to be PCI compliant to a certain extent, or do they not? Because they don't.
I'm not familiar with the financial side and the processing side of Venmo.
Yeah, because that's weird.
Again,
like, are they a
speculating?
merchant? Are they a merchant or just a broker?
They're not.
They're more like a bank.
They're a bank because all they do is transfer currency back and forth, but they also do hold currency for lengths of time.
Okay.
And they also, so they're a bank more than anything.
They're more than a merchant that would take your credit card and provide you with goods or services.
Right.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Yep.
So now with the public feed, is that still by default on? Like, it's still a public feed, still on by default for the users. It was in the news for a blip, and I'm sure anybody that's getting it now doesn't know that actually happened, or is it even an issue?
Yeah, what's funny is it was in the news, even though it's been the case forever. And as soon as you use the app, it's very apparent that there's a public feed. As soon as you open it up, that's what you see is your feeds. They're right there. You can see your own stuff come up in this public feed. So it's not like a weird thing for Venmo users. So it was really weird that the media got hold of it and lost their minds over it. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not.
That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to work. And of course, Venmo made public statements on the issue and said, yeah, that's by design. That's a huge part of our entire ecosystem. They did say at least, if everyone wants us to get rid of it, we'll get rid of it. But as of right now, the feed is still public, and it's public by default. And that's super interesting to me because, especially now, like post Cambridge Analytica, the concept of public by default has been on people's minds. You have Facebook, who has just completely done a 180 on not only just public by default, but also the ability for so many things to post to your Facebook feed has been eliminated. And that was huge news. Facebook stock is plummeting by the hour. And yet Venmo comes out and says, no, we're gonna stick by original decision. This is how it's going to be, unless our user base votes with their dollar and stops using us, or everyone starts turning it off or something like that. Venmo has opted to keep public by default as their policy.
Now, when it came to scraping this, at least initially, was this something that could be done with just simple, GET requests, whether it was curl or otherwise? I mean, it sounds like it's more difficult now, but at least when this was initially discovered, even though it was, out there by default for a long time, how easy would it be to get the full data set, and how far back does that data set go?
I have seen massive studies going on for the 2017 year, and there are people who have reported being able to get upwards of 300 million transactions, 300 to 400 million, which would cover most of 2017, and that's insane. I could not find information from them on how they did it, because when I tried to do it, it was exceedingly hard, and it was taking me longer to get, say, a day's worth of transactions. It took me longer than 24 hours to get 24 hours worth of transactions.
Right.
And that's with...
By design, right? Yeah.
I would hope so. Yeah, that's with spinning up, multiple machines to do the scraping, and doing a lot of shiesty stuff to get around a lot of the throttling and security measures that are in place. Nobody had hosted that data that they claim to have scraped, even though you have people saying, I hope somebody else can find some interesting things in this data like I did, and then they don't post the data anywhere. And because
they don't want to get sued.
I couldn't find any evidence, hard evidence that anyone actually did the work. Not that I'm saying they did.
What's the most damaging thing you could do with the data for the users of Venmo?
I have personal safety concerns, tracking down, tracking and then extortion. Extortion's a big one. So exploitation via extortion. Those are my personal worries, and I think everyone would have their own personal worries. But I think that's the most damaging, is being an individual target of somebody based off of information that they have on you that maybe you didn't intend to be public. Just going through the data I was able to collect, it's drugs and hookers.
I was gonna say, how much does Venmo police what people are buying if it's illegal products and or services?
Well, initially none, and still none, because they can't necessarily decline transactions based on something you typed in the message. Other than what they just last month put out a terms of service update that says you're no longer allowed to make drug references within your transactions. Now that's really hard to detect, because the kids these days have their own lingo. I mean, you can create a lingo on the fly. As it applies to and that's what'll just happen, because eggplants and volcanoes don't mean
eggplants and volcanoes is not just a random reference that you made, huh?
Right. And they'll make up. I mean, you've got the head massage emojis. You can, you can use whatever you want in there. And that was one of the things I discovered, was all this cryptic language people are using for drugs now. Diamonds means generally it's crack, meth, or cocaine.
Right.
People are using the old maple leaf icon to, we know what that means. Really interesting stuff. So the only things I've really been seeing get caught and immediately shut down are usage of the pill emoji.
Yeah.
But what if I'm just picking my drugs up from Walgreens? And
True.
Yeah, but you also don't have to leave any kind of message
emoji or message.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's all the fun of using it, and that's how they push it, and that's why everyone loves it. But yeah, it's really hard to police what people are buying with your stuff, because it's a person-to-person transaction. And so all they said is hey, stop telling people you're doing it, at least. That's the most they can do. Yeah. And so I've definitely seen that.
It's actually good for some industries that are legal but have come under certain scrutiny that make it difficult to do business with a bank.
Sure.
Give you an example. These fine cigars that you and I enjoy, and
this is
finally
a
together.
Great
cheers for that.
Thank you, sir.
A lot of tobacco retailers, if you're selling a tobacco product of any kind, your credit card transaction provider or your bank may decide to stop doing business with you. I ran into this with Stogie Geeks.
Yes.
We would actually, because of the name, we as Stogie Geeks are unable to take out ads on Facebook and unable to host our website in certain places that offer e-commerce, because their e-commerce says you cannot sell tobacco. Even though I'm licensed, if I were to be licensed in the state, I would have to do that to sell cigars out of Rhode Island, right? I would go get my license for that. and I would pay taxes on that, on all those tobacco products, and I would be a registered, completely 100% legal. I would do the age verification as best I can. And even though I'm following all those laws, they may decide, hey, you know what, you can't do business with us to conduct those transactions.
Absolutely. Follow up to that. Chicago has a massive burlesque scene. I was a piercer in the Chicago region for a very long time. And as such...
Oh, that's not a euphemism.
No.
Okay, gotcha.
So but it was a natural progression from piercer into penetration tester.
I see that.
Here
yes.
I am.
But ching.
Yeah. Nerd jokes. So what's our demographic here? And so I because of that crossover, I have many friends who operate in the burlesque and then subsequently the kind of dominatrix BDSM realm.
Sure.
Neither of them involve nudity or sex or anything of that
breaking
nature.
Any laws
or breaking any laws. That's not prostitution. Many of them are registered businesses. And they regularly have to deal with this issue of having their accounts frozen.
Yes.
For by violating various, vice laws, and they're like, I'm not doing anything. This isn't prostitution. It doesn't meet any of the requirements. And yet, these banks can just declare that you've done something illegal and now freeze your assets, so you can't pay your rent, even though you've done nothing wrong, and so you get no due process. There's no trial.
Right, exactly.
You have to file a civil case against this private bank to get your funds unfrozen. Good luck, taking. I'll guarantee you, Venmo, PayPal, etc. have lawyers on retainer, whereas the average burlesque dancer doesn't have $500 to file a civil case. Yeah. Craziness.
All right. Keith, I don't know where else you want to go before we transition to the next segment, but...
Yeah. So, I have my traditional 5 questions, which I did not prep Johnny for, which ought to be fun. But before that, so you're actually giving this talk at Hackfest Canada. I know that you've been there since Hackfest Canada 7, I think.
7,
yeah?
I believe 7. Yeah, they keep asking me back, which is weird.
I really enjoyed your talk last year. I mean,
I have a blast there. It's definitely some my top 3 favorite conferences. I love Hackfest Canada. They got they're sold out this year, though. They're trying to figure out how to unsell out so that you can still buy more tickets and go and come see. Myself, Keith won't be going this year. They're hosting the Canada's first ever social engineering competition. So that's going to be really cool.
What was weird as well is I think that they were doing something related to social engineering last year. I don't know if it was a competition, but I remember it was all in French because it's in Quebec, so it's it's a French Canada. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on here, but it sounds like it's really exciting. So it's just kind of interesting sitting there in the room, listening to people and not.
Yeah, it is a fully bilingual conference. They're usually having trouble finding English-speaking presenters, which I think is really cool because it means you're getting a lot of the local French-speaking information security there to speak to the locals in their native language, which of course conveys information way better. However, they do get a lot of people from other parts of Canada and the world who don't speak French, and that's kind of a hindrance, and they want to make sure that those people also are getting their money's worth from the conference. So they really do put a lot of effort in making sure that they can get some entertaining and intelligent informational speakers that speak English up in there.
By French,
in the hotel there,
French Canadian,
awesome.
Which is French Canadian, which is different from
Quebecois.
Yes,
which is different from
very
French.
Different,
I'm sure you've
offended a lot of people, and you're going there. I'm just trying to cover
these
your
customs, man. They're gonna get me at customs again. They're gonna be like, "Oh, Johnny,
you said we speak French.
We do not speak. I love that. By the way, I'm going to call you out to the viewers. There is a full wet bar back here. Yeah. This is amazing. There's 16 different kinds of scotch just here.
And there's a urinal right in the middle.
Yeah. And I'm still just mixing up my fade in a 7-Eleven cup.
I've never been on set, which is the funniest thing. I mean, I'll be down there for the Christmas episode, but which is ironic because this is the Christmas episode too, sort of. So it's
the pre-Christmas Christmas episode.
This is the real Christmas episode.
Yeah. Indeed.
It's great. It's if you watch ESPN, it's like that. The studio's that big. There's that many people running around here. I was amazed at just the sheer amount of staffing that goes into.
Yet no makeup.
Yeah, and yet no makeup. I had to do my own makeup.
Doesn't need it. Johnny.
I just always have it on. You don't know.
That's it.
That's a trick to makeup, isn't it? People shouldn't know you're wearing it.
That's right. It's a trick to wearing women's lingerie too, I think. What?
What?
How did we?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think we were doing 5 questions.
I have 5 questions. They mostly revolve around sizing, but.
So the first question
I'm gonna go
I
back to this
ask,
phallic
not
object
quite
while
side,
you.
but it's close, Johnny. Is what were the specs like on your first computer?
Define first computer. The first one that I had in my house to use on my own.
Or stole. I mean, you know.
The first one I ever had in my own home was a Trash 80, but I had it way beyond the time that a Trash 80 was useful. Somebody had, and in fact, it was a loaner. Someone had given it to us so I could write reports for school on it, but it was like, it didn't have a word processor on it. Like I had to figure out, they'll go find a word processor written in BASIC that would run on a TRS 80. After that, someone, I think an uncle had given me a 486 DX. So it was an Intel 486 DX CPU, which had the built-in math coprocessor, which was a huge deal.
Lightning fast.
Yeah. Yeah, lightning fast. No, in fact, it was still pretty old at the time.
Still pretty slow. Now that I think
we didn't have a lot of money in the Christmas house.
You could get Doom to run on the 486.
Actually, to get Doom to run, this is what I did. It's funny you brought it up. I had to go down to the local computer shop, which was still like a hole in the wall, like some guy, some computer nerd selling computer hardware, because there was no Best Buy wasn't selling computer stuff.
Yeah.
And so I went in, and my video card didn't have enough video RAM to run Doom, and so I had to buy some video RAM. This was back when you'd get a video card and it had empty sockets on it, and so you'd buy a couple of RAM chips and pop them in to get the screen resolution and the color depth you were looking for. So that's like the specs on my computer varied in the amount of VRAM it had. That's how old that computer was.
Nice.
I want to say I think I got it up to 16 megs of RAM. Those were fast page RAM. So we have definitely predates SD-RAM. It had a 500 megabyte hard drive. I definitely remember that. It was a 512 meg hard drive that I filled up pretty damn fast. And what are you going to do? So it was just constantly storing everything on floppy disks, which turns out don't have too long of a lifespan, and so you're just constantly getting corrupted and lost files because everything you own has to be on these like magnetic floppies, and they sit in this box and just rub against each other, and nothing good comes of that. So those were the horrible dark days. Those were bad times, and I don't recommend it.
A little bit later for me, I actually had
because you're like 24.
Not quite. Like almost 33, almost.
Okay, so 32 and a half, 32 and 3/4. Is that what we're doing?
We're a little bit of that, yes. So my next question though is, what programming language did you learn first? It sounds like it was BASIC, but did you learn any others in the process of getting your computers to run?
Various forms of BASIC, and then let's see, what was the one? It's probably still BASIC. The one with the turtle where you can make it draw the lines to make pictures. It was like a graphical BASIC.
Visual Basic?
No, way before Visual Basic. This was, people who know it will know it, because it had a little triangle and it called it the turtle, and you would just be like 10, go to, you would just give it coordinates and it would move this turtle around the screen and draw a picture. I don't remember the name of it anymore. That was one of the first ones I learned, and you got to remember I'm in 2nd, 3rd grade at the time. The first program I ever wrote, I was 6, and I had a Magnavox Odyssey 2. So let's count that as a first computer because it had a keyboard on it. It was a cartridge-based video game system. Came out in 79 or 80, I think, or 80. No, I think the Magnavox Odyssey 2 came out in 89 or 82, and because people weren't like sold on the idea of like video games in the house yet, they had to also make it a computer because people were sold on that idea for some reason.
Right.
Even though both were awful. And this is trying to compete with like Atari and things like that. So anyway, it had a computer programming cartridge, and it came with a big manual. And I fumbled through this as much as a 6-year-old can do. And I wrote a little "Hello World" like a 3-liner, and I made the TV say some bad words, and it blew my mind. And I remember going to the kitchen and getting my mom to show her that I can make the TV do whatever I want. And she was like, she was less pleased with the outcome than I was. But like that, all right. So whatever that language was, and it was a form of BASIC. It was it was print and then some words and go to 10 stuff like that. So it was some form of BASIC.
Nice.
But then after that, there was some like we learned Pascal and Turbo Pascal in like 6th and 7th grade, and then Visual Basic was big after that.
I think your turtle logo programming language is called Logo.
Logo. That's what it was. Yes. Yep. Logo.
Sorry. Carry on, Keith.
No, that predates me.
Good work. That's why we have the research staff. That's really cool. That's really
I learned
cool.
a bit of BASIC when ironically, I think it was in high school that they were teaching BASIC, which was weird.
So just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago, in fact. So the next question, dragging you into the holy war here, Vim or Emacs?
I've been using Emacs for almost 30 years now, primarily because I don't know how to exit it. So
well, hey, that settles that.
I don't prefer it. That's just what's going on.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
It's right here. It's horrible.
The best answer ever.
Through. I'm not kidding. There it goes. It's brand new Mac. It's still running Emacs.
So I gotta ask then, while you're stuck in Emacs, spaces or tabs?
What's that? Spaces or tabs? Oh, tabs. Tabs. I'll fight you.
Well, okay.
Tabs all day. Let's fight.
Last question.
It's more efficient. It's less keystrokes.
So fair. I always do 4 spaces as a tab is usually the way I run it. But hey, and whatever goes, right? I always hit the tab key and now we're fighting.
Now you're just trying to make everyone happy, and nobody wins when you do that.
I mean, my code seems to be fine. My code wins. It compiles.
I've written a lot of awful crap that runs, Keith.
Fair. Hey, we're going to have a few of those in the news segment, so hold on to that thought.
I'm going to have a few at Hackfest Canada.
Last question before we break for the news is who would you nominate, or what topic would you like to see us cover on a future episode of Application Security Weekly?
Oh, I would love to see, I have an answer for both, and it's the same thing. I would love to see you guys talk more about industrial security / SCADA security, because I feel like that's such a tiny niche market that everyone mentions and sees come across their feed, but really has only iota of concept of what SCADA is and how SCADA is different from industrial communications. I gave a talk on it at RSA back in April, and I just did a SCADA 101 talk, like, here's what this means, and here are the security implications. And the room was packed. And we had so many people coming up afterwards saying, thank you for doing that. That was all the clarification I needed. I see all these words getting thrown around. I have no idea what any of it means and what I have to do about it. Thanks for at least giving me this like 101 glossary terms, contextual information. And so now that it's all in the news and we're constantly seeing these power companies getting hacked through various means, I would love to see you have someone come on and talk about that more in depth. And for that, I would nominate Kate Vida, Cato, she's Vicat on Twitter. She spent years in an industrial security space working for an energy supplier. She would be a great person to talk to about that. She is currently penetration tester at Secure Ideas. She also does some of my favorite user awareness training, because she trains people on personal security, which then translates very well to your work security. And she's super passionate about it, and she's incredibly positive, which is a very difficult thing to find in our community. So I'd love to see her on the show. Hit her up.
Awesome. Absolutely will.
Cool.
With that, we're going to take a short break and then come back for the news.
Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Do you need a web application security solution that can improve your detection rate and enable easier remediation? Acunetics has a fully automated solution that can detect and report over 4,500 web vulnerabilities. Fast and scalable, it can scan thousands of pages without interruption, including HTML5, JavaScript, and single-page applications. Acunetics provides accuracy with the lowest false positives by combining black box and white box testing. For more information, visit acunetics.com/securityweekly. Hard-coded credentials can be trouble, but not as much trouble as a vulnerable DevOps environment. If you want protection without the hassle of security slowing you down, CyberArk, the #1 provider in privileged access security, has the solution for you. With CyberArk Conjur, developers can easily secure secrets across any DevOps toolchain or platform, whether your application runs in the cloud or on premises. Eliminate the headaches of managing secrets and try Conjur open source for free with no strings attached. Visit conjur.org/ASW to get started today.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the application security news for the week of October 28th. Still with us, Johnny Xmas, got it right this time, and of course, the illustrious co-host, Paul Asadorian. Guys, where do you want to get started this week? There's plenty of news on there.
Well, I had to write showing us up. Huh? Yeah, this is it. Let's talk about MikroTik routers. I mentioned that earlier in the news last week, I think.
So basically, what ended up happening with these MikroTik routers, I'm pulling up my notes now as well. So they ended up having a remote code execution vulnerability that was disclosed at DerbyCon 8, I believe, or was talked about at DerbyCon 8 a few weeks ago. Basically, what it ended up being was a Tenable researcher found that CVE 2018-14847 allowed unauthenticated remote code execution for a flaw that had previously been disclosed or talked about, but was basically seen as not remotely exploitable, and so they didn't really deal with it until, of course, they found out, hey, guess what? It is, and now you're screwed. So yeah, that's to kick things off. I don't know, Johnny, do you have any thoughts on this? Have you done any reading on this in your explorations lately?
No, not on this one in particular. But then you can fill me in. Here's my main question whenever I see these router exploits. Can I exploit it from the WAN interface? Can I get an IP and then run an exploit against this to do an RCE? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer in this case is
yeah. The answer is almost always no when you see a lot of these router vulnerabilities come out, is it already requires you to be on the LAN via some other means. And sometimes that is as easy as just guessing.
Owning your Android phone and then attacking your internal router?
Right? Or guessing a crappy router password like everyone has. Putting an exclamation point on the end of your password is not security enhancement. No. And I see that so much. But any owned device then connected to the LAN, absolutely that can be exploited. But to have something where now I'm back to the days of running sub 7 and scanning all the Comcast IPs for what's listening on this port and just running that exploit and seeing what goes. That's insane. That's a remote ownage of people's homes.
I like the vigilante aspect. Like someone was out there in another related story that someone was out there just exploiting this flaw and just patching it for everyone.
Yeah, so that's not a new mentality. We were seeing that going on. I want to say most famously with the Mirai botnet.
Even before that, the lionworm? The lionworm.
Yeah, absolutely, the lionworm. And so that's some of these people remain silent on it. There's some people like Chris Roberts, Psydragon, who very loudly boasts about his activities in those realms. And sometimes, it's there's nice guys just patching things, and sometimes there's not so nice guys bricking them. But bricking them for the greater good, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Sure.
As they say.
Or their own personal gain. Like, was it the Adobe Flash exploits that were like, hey, we've got an update. It's a fake update, but it's a real update. It actually patches your stuff. but only after it implants a backdoor for crypto mining on your system. Then it patches your stuff so no one else can get in.
Yeah, and
that was fun to talk
That was
about.
a weird one. I had to read that one more than once to make sure that I definitely understood that that's the weird roundabout kind of figure 6 thing that was going on in that scenario. It's like, yes, it does. In fact, update your Flash to a patched version. Yep. And as payment for their service, they're asking that you mine some cryptocurrency.
Now, what's interesting is that can actually get you caught, right? Because what if I see things are patched, but I haven't rolled out the patch yet? I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So there was a Cray supercomputer once upon a time in a life long ago. That the way the attackers were discovered was
that your first computer? Is that
no,
what you're
it was
saying?
not. I wish. They were super. I mean, it's almost as like a bench in your entryway, right?
Humble bragging. Oh, it was an old Cray.
No. And so they had broke in. They were doing all kinds of stuff, but patching things to make sure that no one else got in. And it was the patching of things that got them caught, not the other behavior, which is interesting.
Interesting. Well, very interesting.
Wouldn't patching also, like, especially in this case, I know that certain routers don't have especially these routers, probably Soho routers, don't have very good logging, but wouldn't that at least give some indication as to who was doing the patching based on the remote authentication to the device? Like, you'd think?
Well, that's if it's a backdoor or not, right?
And it's unauthenticated.
Yeah.
True.
So, so it depends on their logging, and generally what I've found is the cheaper the router, not to disparage MikroTik too much, but the cheaper the router, the less logging is going on in there. Just because logging incurs, a huge resource hit. You need storage.
True.
How often do the logs roll? If they're rolling every 4 hours, just it's a low flash memory, you might, there might be nothing there. And yeah, it is a big ordeal with forensics on home, Soho routers, is they just don't have those advanced features that forensics needs.
And it's interesting, though, especially with the kind of open router initiative. DDWRT is one that always comes to mind. Is like, if you're using an old router and you want to try and keep the longevity of it a little bit, and maybe even depending on the interfaces on the device, put your logs off to an external hard drive, which is probably super cheap these days compared to way back when.
If your device has the resources to even handle log offloading like that, you're running into just CPU cycle problems even in some of these.
Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
Sure. And then there's, who's doing that? You might. We might.
Right.
But the average MikroTik router owner? No, absolutely not.
Well, and you wonder how much choice, and if they did have a choice, was it based on the recommendation? So, like, bandwidth has grown significantly over the past 10 years, so much so that if you throw a crappy router you're in, it's going to run crappy, and then be like, oh, I'm just going to run what's from the provider rather than buy something off the shelf.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily impacts the security, because in either case, you could be getting something pretty crappy.
I have at least seen routers now coming out, even on the cheap end, that are doing auto-updating. There are some vendors that, and Soho vendors that are being pretty good about providing patches, because a lot of them are just running the paid version of DDWRT.
Right.
And so whenever that has a patch come out, it's real easy for the vendor to just quickly QA it and fire it out. And so that's really cool. That's Asus is one of them that comes to mind that runs DDWRT, and
just remember that announcement back then.
Yeah, I've come across a few several-year-old Soho Asus routers that are still receiving updates. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
That's definitely awesome, and it's something that you don't see very often.
Hopefully, it will be soon.
I know, right? Speaking of default stuff. Did you guys check out the ZDNet article? So it's under the "If you build it, they will come" story number 1 on how China has been hijacking internet backbones or the internet backbone from Western countries.
Is this news? I think this has always been going on, or at least people have been trying. Right?
It's BGP hijacking, but the thing is this story actually does a little bit of investigative research. So basically what they found, and this is actually out of the U.S. Naval War College and Tel Aviv University, as a joint white paper that was released. And so dating back to North America in the early 2000s, point of presence, or POP, data, are data centers that do nothing more than just reroute traffic, especially for, between smaller networks. So maybe between Comcast and Verizon, for example.
Yeah, small networks like Comcast and Verizon.
I mean, well, like local data centers, right? So like here in the Northeast, maybe between like Providence and Boston, right? Like something like that. So what they found, though, was there's, I think it was 8 in total. I have to go back and look at the notes here, but there are several of these in the US and 2 in Canada that are owned by China Telecom. And so, right around the time that the US signed that agreement with China under President Obama to effectively stop all hacking activities by the Chinese military, to steal intellectual property secrets from US industry and pass it back into Chinese industry, they saw this basically start to just fire up quite a bit. I don't know if did you guys catch anything from this article that stood out to you? There's a number of things that I saw, but I wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to chime in.
I did not see that. Apparently, we don't think it's interesting enough to comment on.
I think we're running into...
Johnny's going to comment on it.
We're running into this problem of just complacency. Because, like you said, we've been seeing this forever. This has been a known thing that, when we see it happen one more time, Paul and I just go, well, yeah, of course that's what's happening. Right. And the complacency, it's pseudo-complacency in that, hopefully we also both operate under this impression that it's going on, and so we watch what we're doing. We have always on VPNs, taking care of a lot of this. But as far as the general public goes, maybe it doesn't apply to them as well, but we're talking about theft, the IP theft, intellectual property theft, and this is a big thing, and it's especially a big thing in the industrial sectors, the sectors that generate our GDP revenue. The companies that make things and invent new things. Like the U.S. government just this year, just very recently, a couple of months ago, named manufacturing to now be critical infrastructure. It's crazy to me that it wasn't before, but that means now we have to have regulatory systems put in place to make sure that manufacturing companies are going through proper security auditing. And so I was just speaking at a conference in Chicago on that. UI Labs is being named the National Center for cybersecurity manufacturing. And I was looking through what all of these manufacturers do as far as cybersecurity goes, and it's effectively nothing. You're worried about China, stealing IP via potentially unencrypted or maybe even decrypting traffic somehow via, backbones. That's so late in the communications pipeline that getting anything out of there is, you have a way smaller of a chance. Whereas just simply infecting manufacturing company computers with rats is so much easier because they're so susceptible, because nobody thinks of their equipment as IT equipment. They don't think of it as being important. And these are, you go down these manufacturing lines and they're all running unpatched Windows machines from forever ago. And these companies have wide open SMB shares on their networks that are hosting what even the people who put the files on the SMB shares don't realize is confidential IP. And so it's super easy to just get into these manufacturing centers and start dumping stuff left and right and figuring out what you got later versus, getting all hot and bothered about, they're listening in on our BGP runs. Like that's crazy, and they shouldn't be. And I'm not saying that they can't gain anything from doing such things. I'm just saying that they have so many more effective, easier ways of stealing our IP, if that's the topic of conversation here, that if we're going to get uppity about something, we need to get uppity about it in the right place to the right people and raise awareness where it needs to be raised. The people who manage those BGP routes, they already know. They're aware of the security implications of their job and what they're doing. The people who are actually working in these manufacturing centers that are working with this intellectual property, your CAD designs, your blueprints, things like that, your trademark, your registered stuff, they don't know security. They know carving equipment out of a block of aluminum in a CNC machine. They've never been trained in security. And the firmware they get for these CNC machines is coming straight out of China. And there's, who's checking that firmware? It's almost nobody. The amount of research being done on, the industrial side for this sort of equipment is minuscule globally. And I've seen this firmware. It's terrible. It's easily reversed and backdoored in many, many cases. It's rarely encrypted. When you go to, let's say you've got, a $60 million CNC machine, to get a firmware update for this thing, those several firmware updates, you go to the sketchiest looking websites you've ever seen in your life, and it's impossible to figure out if you're even getting the right one, and half the time you don't. You got to try 6 times or you brick your $60 million machine.
That sucks.
And so, like, you can't even use the common sense of, like, does this site look sketchy? Maybe don't download anything. That's the right site. And so, like, just everything that we teach users on the IT side about what to look for security-wise just doesn't apply in the industrial space. And that's what's killing us. And it's not like I'm giving away the farm here. China knows that. Everyone knows that. And of course, it's not just China. There's far more dangerous, more active threat actors out there than China. So it's kind of funny that we keep just referencing China, because I feel like that draws attention away from the real threats.
Well, let's mention, of course, like we could probably go into the rabbit hole of the electorate and all of that other goodness. I'm not going to touch that.
Yeah, let's get political.
Third yeah, not going to touch that third round now. But what I thought was interesting about this article was that it's the U.S. War College and Tel Aviv University that are coming right out and just calling them out. Right, like most of the time, this sort of thing is kind of done either through like news media outlets, or it's done through kind of back channels, and they never really call out specific companies like China Telecom, for example, directly.
Right.
Nor do they actually like have it come from such sources as the U.S. Naval War College or Tel Aviv University, right? Like that's basically like saying U.S. Army intelligence and I forget what they call the intelligence unit in Israel, but
yeah, and a lot of times you see, especially when it's just the media calling it out, or smaller companies or just less advanced companies, you see them blaming China, and you go, well, it's China IPs.
Yeah.
Those are really easy to get your hands on.
Sure.
Whereas when you're dealing like straight up with China Telecom and BGP routes, it's harder to plausibly deny that it's China in this case. And so at least, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this being true. It's likely true, and that gives me mixed feelings, is what
I have mixed feelings about surveys and survey data.
I knew you were going to touch on that, Paul.
Because how much I like to pick apart a survey. Like, there's nothing better for me in the show where I'm like, it's time to pick apart a survey.
Yeah. I think 63% of all people feel that way.
Yes.
So
and 83% of all statistics are made up or something like that. Isn't that another?
What's your source on that? Was it me?
Yes. Yes. Well, so, and I hate to pick on the vendors, because a lot of times they're vendors that I like Veracode, CA Veracode, which I do like, and I like the people there because I know the people there and I like them. I just hate surveys and data,
right.
So they produce this survey with all this data, right, that they collected from all like their sensors and everything, and they put together a bunch of statistics, which is all well and good. I'm not questioning that their statistics aren't accurate. That's not what I'm saying. But they talked about the state of software security, in that how often people, or how long people take to fix a flaw. And so there's lots of numbers there, and it looks really fancy. But when you get to the key takeaways, right, they've got 4. Number 1, the speed at which developers fix flaws is directly related to the risks the software creates over time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
2, with the volume of flaws that some developers face, it's important to prioritize and address them by severity. Okay. Using DevSecOps development methodology makes it possible to fix flaws more quickly. Okay. Developers need to carefully evaluate their use of vulnerable open source components. Apparently that section was written by Captain Obvious, because these are all things
we talk. Say all of these.
I don't need a survey to tell me that these are conclusions that I can draw.
And
is it just me?
This is almost like a clickbait article. Like, it's got all the buzzwords you need, and it conveys no new information.
What I found really weird and interesting in this article, though, just above that section, actually a couple of sections above, under the application security flaw correction rate, in 5 of the 7, let's see here, 5 of the 7 industries, right? So save for healthcare and technology, code quality was one of the top issues. That's interesting to me, especially because healthcare, you'd think that code quality would probably still be an issue. Technology, we all know code quality is an issue there. But that for financial, government and education, manufacturing, infrastructure, and retail, code quality was one of the top problems.
I'm not at all surprised by that. from having spent years as a penetration tester, focusing on a lot of my, I would say the majority of my clients were healthcare and financial, and then just general, technology, just, IT, you're a pen tester, that's what you come up against. There's so many applications out there that are written by low quality, what are we going to call them? Sweatshops, I guess. Application sweatshops, especially, man, healthcare. How many times, I'm sure everyone watching this show has gone to the doctor, gone to a hospital, snuck around and taken a look at the application they're using, and they go, wow, that just looks janky. Like, the application where you could tell how bad it is and you could tell exactly where to begin exploiting it just based on like what it looks like. Yeah. And they're like, that's written in Visual Basic 6. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's because these healthcare applications, they're written in VB6, speaking off the cuff. But
my question is, how did they measure code quality? Because it somewhat, just code quality, the phrase in and of itself is somewhat subjective.
It's by weight.
Ah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So they weigh all the code, and then they weigh the bad code versus the good code.
Well,
and that's
no, it's just more code means better quality. That's the bottom line.
I gotcha.
Just the more lines of code means an infinitely smaller.
That's but that's one of my major issues with the data.
Right.
And I'm sure the report probably has better metrics.
Didn't know.
And I didn't read the actual report. I just read the report on it. So I guess I'm critiquing.
It's right there.
There's a link. Yeah, there's a link to the report, which I probably have to register to get a copy of.
No, I have. Anyway,
I
didn't know we were going to just question. I mean, if you're going to get down to like that granular of nitpicking on a study,
I probably should read the report.
We shouldn't discuss this at all because you would at least hope that someone like Veracode would have a solid definition of what they consider to be code quality.
I'm sure that's in the report.
One job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say overall, even if we're talking relative code quality, the relative code quality of applications I see running on healthcare systems and retail systems like POSs, any POS that's still like based on an embedded OS, that software has likely not been updated in 5 to 10 years.
POS takes on multiple meetings there?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. Unless they're the ones running on the iPads, and then they're flawless. And that's so I worked in retail information security for about 5 years, and our point of sale systems ran some ancient, bizarre crap, and that had no updates ever put out for it. And in fact, even before that company,
so I'll tell you how crappy that code is on your point of sale systems.
Yeah.
I used to write code that ended up in retail point of systems.
Oh,
point of sale systems.
Guys, it was Paul's fault.
I mean, this was back in the 90s, though. I mean,
that's probably.
Yeah. You're laughing because they can't be possibly still in production today.
Are we going back to like what was the first program you ever wrote? Did you write it for a POS system in the 90s and it's still running at Best Buy?
Yeah, I used Logo to write.
How many retail stores do you go into and they're still running some green screens?
Oh yeah, well that's what it was actually IBM
I don't actually retail
4690. 4690 was IBM's operating system for point of sale systems. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with that.
I did. I don't want to name the retailer because they're still doing it. But I had a good one and I lost it now.
Damn it.
Next time you're in a police department, next time you get arrested, look at this. Look at the systems they're using. It's still terminal based, mainframe backend, and that hasn't been updated in since 1994 when it was written. It was never updated because a lot of those you paid the company for this software and they gave it to you and that was it.
It was before cloud subscriptions, in other words.
It was before cloud.
Yeah.
It was when nobody had the bandwidth to make cloud usable. You would often pay a company specifically to write this point of sale system software for you, or what booking system for the police department, and you'd get it, and that was it. And if you needed updates to it, if you needed to add functionality, you would have to call this company again and pay them more money to add that functionality. And there was no security patching, there was no security auditing being done in any of this stuff. And so, given how broke municipalities are, and now brick and mortar retailers, you don't see them paying these companies to get any kind of updates done. You don't see them doing security audits. The most you see them is doing internal audits and then trying to write ACLs to just get people from talking to the machines as much as possible. But security's not happening, and yet the software is not going away. You if you spin up a whole new company, they might buy brand new software by today's standards, and then in 20 years, it's going to be discovered to be riddled with holes. But
speaking of software riddled with holes, we've got time for maybe one more story, right? WordPress team, who also presented at DerbyCon, is working to wipe out older versions from existence on the internet. And by wipe out, I don't mean they're rendering their software useless so that it doesn't work anymore. They are making automatic updates extend back further into older versions of WordPress to get them up to date.
Man, that's really cool. And to be fair, WordPress, especially the newer two-ish major versions of WordPress, 2 to 3 major versions, have been really solid. It's the
PHP is at 7 or greater, right? So like if you're updated on PHP and WordPress, you're in much better shape,
right?
And your plugins aren't complete crap.
And generally, your auto updaters take care of both of those.
Yep.
The plugins have famously been the real problem.
Yeah.
WordPress itself, the core WordPress, has not had the ocean of critical vulnerabilities that it used to in years. They've done a great job.
To address the plugin, the team is working with the most popular WordPress plugins and helping them get their code up to date and more secure. And what they said was, they've got apparently data to back this up, that the other plugins will borrow code heavily from the major plugins, and they've been borrowing now this more secure code, and it's been improving the overall quality of code across the whole plugin infrastructure, which...
That is a fantastic idea.
A good idea. Given the number of plugins that are out there, I question the impact that that's having.
They're up to 9.
It is a step in the right direction, though, right?
Yeah. It's 9 is what they're up to?
Plugins or versions?
No, 9 plugins, I think, exist. So
how many... Yeah, and there's how many millions of plugins out there in any case? At least they're trying. At least they're trying.
They are. They're clearly trying. They're trying much more than should be expected, which is really cool. Developing a means of updating third-party software. That's nuts. That's awesome.
And I was just going to add as well, it's one of those situations where, especially for companies like WordPress, at some point, like end of life really means end of life. And they did talk about, they're looking at possibly limiting that to some degree, of course, because this is putting a huge load on their security team to actually go out and do updates for these other things. But I'm thinking about the plugin infrastructure for just a moment and thinking back to like the early days of writing websites, like, GeoCities or AngelFire or all those good things. I mean, how many times did you steal code off of really cool looking sites as well, right? I'm sure people are doing the same thing with their plugin environment today.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, there's so many sites that push that. The reason this really needs to be commended is that WordPress is acknowledging that it has accidentally become part of the internet, like a pillar of the internet. It is a core component of web infrastructure, and they're taking on the moral responsibility that comes with that, even though, well, I mean, I'm sure that was always their hope. What company doesn't want to become a core piece of web infrastructure? But instead of saying like, hey, these security problems aren't our fault, it's all the users, it's all the people who wrote the plugins, there's nothing we can do. They're saying, look, we recognize that, this is sort of our doing. We're going to try to do what we can to correct this. However, be aware it's a massive burden on our security team, and WordPress, isn't $1 trillion a year company.
I mean, they run something like 60% of the internet. And I know that 2 weeks ago, at least when I was on the show last, we were talking about how a majority of the internet, especially WordPress, Drupal, et cetera, run on PHP. I think it's like 5.7 or something, which is going end of life end of this year. So,
bear in mind, end of life doesn't mean that it disappears and stops working. It just means when, the eternal blue equivalent for PHP 5.7 comes out, we've got major panic. And I got to hear about that on CNN.
That much of the internet, that's potentially, that is a whole lot of problems.
What do you think the chances are somebody's just sitting on an O day for that and waiting?
And, really high.
6 to 12 months after 5.7 goes end of life, they drop an O day, and then PHP goes, we don't have time for this. I don't know if you've ever watched the PHP mailing list. It's not 7,000 contributors. It's a very tiny amount, and they're focusing very heavily on current stuff. I would imagine that definitely if some devastating O-Day came out for 5.7, they would go back and figure out something to do about it. But they're going to stop actively looking at 5.7, and that's what's important to know.
Yeah.
But everyone else is not.
Doom and gloom going right into Halloween. Johnny, thanks for joining us on the show. And of course, thank you everyone for joining us this week for another episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to git, commit, and class.